Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show live on May the 3rd, 2023. And as usual, we've got a great guest for you. I always start off with a little bit of Bob. I'm looking over to my right. I'm telling myself, we got to let Bob sort of ease down a little bit. But it's happy to have you back here. We got a great guest for you today. After we talk about what we always want to talk about, folks. So you got to stay woke on Woke Wednesday. You hear about talking to you. Could you be loved? Oh, folks, thank you so much and welcome back, as I said, to Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show live. And we've got a great guest for you today. We're happy to have you back here as we talk about what we always want to talk about on the show as we get started, small business issues. But of course, after small business issues, a quick little check on things, a quick little check on health. And then after that, we're going to go right into the favorite subject. It's time to talk about voting rights again and what you should be doing. Because as I always tell you, you can't have a democracy without voting rights. You just can't. So until we get that passed on a national level again, we've got to keep talking about it. It's the long game. Anyway, I'm at an undisclosed location again, different sort of background, all clear white walls. I can assure you it's okay. Everything's fine. Did everybody enjoy their week? Hopefully you did. Did you enjoy the correspondence dinner? I always love that correspondence dinner that they do at the White House. It was pretty good this week. I enjoyed it. It's been a fantastic week, a lot of stuff going on. But I always try to pull people back to what I always want to talk to them about. Voting rights, doggone it. It's got to be voting rights. It's going to be voting rights. And man, I've got to get my lighting a little brighter. I mean, this undisclosed location, I don't know whether I'm going to keep being able to do this. I need to get you folks back to my other location. Or my lights are brighter, or I got to fix the lights here. But anyway, you can see me, you can hear me. That's what's mainly important. We got a great guest who's going to be on later on today. So let's go ahead and get things going. Let's keep things moving the way they should be moving. Okay, everything looking well here. My signal's a little low, but hey, it's live podcasting, TV, or internet. But anyway, folks, let me ask you, are you doing okay? Everybody's health okay as we're getting ready to go into the spring? Folks still doing what they always do, making sure that they're, I still see people wearing masks. I wear my mask sometimes when I travel, a little bit. I'll go ahead and throw it on, especially when I get on the plane or closed places. Well, make sure you're doing what you need to do, take care of yourself and your family. As I say every week, and taking care of your health, because we need you here to vote. And I mean vote in every election, local, state, and federal, and not just vote. Get involved. Give somebody $5. Put a yard sign in your yard. Go out and knock doors or canvass for some candidate that you believe in. Better yet, run for office yourself. Listen, they are coming for you whether or not you choose to be involved or not. Folks who don't want you to vote, folks who don't want you to be able to do the best for your home, for your business, for your community, they're not going to stop. So you better make sure that you're doing what you need to do to counter what is going on. And one way you can do that is with voting rights. And by you getting out there and casting your ballot and making sure that the full breadth and authority that the Constitution is afforded you as an American citizen. You gotta do that. And here I am just on my little podcast live. I do and I do some reruns, and I just kind of do this every Wednesday. We've had somebody great last week. This week we've got someone else. Oh, you know what I forgot to wish folks out there? This is also, I believe, AAPI, Asian American and Pacific Islander month. So all my small business owners out there that are Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, we want to wish you fantastic heritage this month, and also hope your small businesses are doing well and that you're getting out there voting, running for office, doing all the things that we do. So I've got a good guest for you, someone that I didn't expect to happen to come by. And I think she's going to come in here and shake things up a little bit. She seems to get a lot done. You know, I don't have a lot of words written on paper about this special guest, but she seems to be on the ball and getting stuff done. So she's got some knowledge she wants to drop on you as soon as I get done talking about voting rights, which I'm about to do. So, but before I do that, remember, the American Rescue Plan is out there. You still have parts of that American Rescue Plan that you can take advantage of. You can go to our website, www.v for Virginia, and that VA for Virginia, D for Democrat, VAD, Democratic Small Business Caucus, SBC, VADSBC.com. Go to our website, click on that website and see what's out there for the American Rescue Plan for small businesses, and see what your state and your federal government has for you. But what we're going to talk about first, and what we do every week, this is episode, let me count it, episode number 94. So we've been out here for over a year talking about this. And we, you know, I want to change the subject, but I'm not going to until this gets done. I'm a little stirred now. We've got to deliver getting this voting rights back in place so that we can secure what's best for our businesses, for our family, and get the right folks in office so we can make some changes that we need to make. So let me go down with my spiel. Folks who've seen it before, but okay, here it goes again. Yes, that's right. We're going to start going through our review of voting rights. Fundamental. And that fundamental part on voting right comes with the trifecta voting rights. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, 1965, 1968. And I talk about it every week because you need to understand these are the bases of the civil rights in this country. We're going to talk about first the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. And there's also provisions in the Civil Rights Act that also forbids discrimination on the basis of sex and race as well, and when it comes to hiring, promoting, and firing. Some quick little graphics out there showing how people have fought to do what they needed to do to make sure that these rights are there. Then, of course, you've got the picture of Lyndon Baines Johnson, president, signing that, Martin Luther King in 1964, and the kids riding on the bus. And you're probably saying to yourself, every day, every week, Mark talks about this. But that is the basis of our civil rights. Your rights are in the Constitution. But because those rights weren't being respected, we needed to pass additional legislation to make sure that everybody understood what those rights covered. And then the next thing that we have in 1965 is the Voting Rights Act of 1965, where you had the act signed into law August 6th by the President Johnson again. You see the now ancestor, Congressman John Lewis, who almost gave his life on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where he was, his skull was cracked open. He almost died out there, along with a lot of other folks who were walking to protest to get their voting rights in this country. And then, of course, you see in the middle, there's Lyndon Baines Johnson and Martin Luther King basically shaking hands, and where the new legislation is signed. And, of course, you see people protesting. You're probably saying to yourself, well, geez, again, why is Mark Kennedy with the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus talking about this every week, or showing podcasts of this every week? Well, I'll talk about it a little later. As you know, your full voting rights that were afforded you in 1965 are no longer there. The Supreme Court took those away in 2013. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the final of the trifecta of these civil rights acts is the last one, which is the Fair Housing Act of 1968. In the Fair Housing Act of 1968, basically prohibited, again, discrimination when it comes to the sale, the rental, financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, sex, and also later amended in Title VIII to include family status, whether it be handicap or LGBTQ, whatever it might be. Again, you see people marching for that, the president signing that into legislation, and people basically saying, hey, we want to be able to buy a home, rent a home, and be able to be treated fairly as far as wealth creation that comes from those properties, being able to rent where we want to be able to rent in decent neighborhoods or whatever it is. All those sorts of things were addressed in the civil rights, those three civil rights bills. So again, quick review: 1964, the Civil Rights Act, right? 1965, the Voting Rights Act, right? And in 1968, the Fair Housing Act. So here's how your basic civil rights are in place. Here's how your voting rights are in place. And of course, everybody has to have a place to live. Here's to give you the right to live. So you need to be able to have civil rights to get employed, voting rights to make sure the right people are there when it comes to employment, business, and everything else. Then, of course, you got to live somewhere, right? You want to make sure you've got the right to buy, purchase, rent, or do whatever you need to do with property. So there we go for your basic rights. Now, why do I keep talking about that? Because I'm going to show you HR 4. This is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, HR 4, passed in 2020. Now, in the 16th Congress, the Voting Rights Act in 2013 was pretty much rendered almost obsolete when the pre-clearance portion was removed from that act by the Supreme Court of the United States. And you're probably saying, well, what's that all about? Well, I talk about it every week. What that means is before, with pre-clearance in place, if there were any changes that took place to anything having to do with voting rights, because this law made it even for all 50 states and territories, any changes had to go through the pre-clearance process, which was taking place in the District of Columbia by the Department of Justice. And no changes could be made unless there were at least 180 days before any election. So you're probably saying why? And the reason why is because before that, we had people who were not, particularly African Americans, who were not allowed to vote. There were voter suppression techniques that were done, back in the day before the civil rights legislation was passed, along with the Voting Rights Act. People were having to take poll tests, pay to vote, or either having to go through some ridiculous things like reciting the Constitution, or in some cases, not being allowed to vote at all, just through physical violence with different organizations out there that would prevent you from voting. So you're probably saying to yourself, well, what's the deal? The legislation got passed. Well, yeah, it got passed, but we had a problem. It passes through the House, right? Once it passes through the House, it has to pass through the Senate before it gets to the president's desk. It goes to a conference between your House of Representatives and the United States Senate, and they all pass it, and then it gets to the president's desk for signature, then it becomes law. The problem is Democrats passed the law to put this back into place so that we wouldn't have all these voter suppression techniques. And by the way, those voter suppression techniques are not allowing absentee voting, right, which is early voting, reducing the number of polling stations that are in certain neighborhoods, meaning if you go to vote, when you go in there to vote, instead of there being an adequate amount of machines, there's maybe 5 machines when you ought to have 20 machines in there. And it takes people much longer to vote. Or they'll just move the voting location further away, so it makes it difficult for you to get there. And then you have these long lines that occur. Then they pass laws that say, hey, you can't bring people food or water. while they're waiting in line. I mean, there were more than 443 voter suppression laws passed in 43 states as soon as the Supreme Court changed the pre-clearance requirement in the Voting Rights Act. It's just a number of different things where they make it difficult for people to vote. The type of ID that may be required, you name it. I've said this almost 100 times, trying to explain this to people why it's so important. Because in the end, you need to be voting for your local elections, for your state elections, and for your federal elections. And if you don't want these crazy laws to be passed, well, in your local and your state elections, you've got to make sure you vote and put the right people in office so they don't pass these state laws that prevent you from voting. Because those state laws that they're passing on voter suppression go away if people who should be voting are voting, and you get the right people in there, you don't have that problem. Plus, on a federal level, when you vote for your congressman, your senator, and your House, your representative, you could then make sure that they pass the law, put it back into place, and the president signs it. But the key part of this is that you have to vote. So that's what you have to do, right? I'm trying to explain that to you to make it easy for people to understand. This is key. You cannot have a democracy without people being allowed to have unfettered access to voting, without state governments and local governments, primarily state governments, putting things into place that make it difficult for certain groups to vote, right? You don't want gerrymandering going on and other things like that. It's just something that you have to do as an American citizen to make sure you have the right to vote. So I come on here every week and talk about it. Go look at the other 95 episodes. I say it in different ways, but today I'm just kind of staying on this one point and saying, get in there and do what you need to do. So I'm going to give you a call to action, right? You're going to say, well, what's that call to action? Well, the call to action is I'm asking you to pick up your phone. They've got a pretty nice piece of software that's called 5Calls, where you can make your voice heard. You go to 5calls.org, or you can just download the app to your iPhone or to your Google phone or your Android. Basically, you put your issue in there, whatever the issue may be, and it automatically knows, tells you what your congressman's number is, allows you to text them or know their location, but more importantly, allows you to make a call quickly to the congressman's office who represents you and say, I know about the HR 4, and I know about what the acts that the Senate has passed, and I want to let you know, congressperson, that we want you to make sure that you vote for this, pass it again, and make sure it gets to the president's desk. It's as simple as that. I don't care whether you have an Android or an Apple. So I've got it for both phones. For the Apple or either the Android, they're both there. It's called 5Calls, right? Easy to do, very easy to use. There it is, right? Call to action. Go to your app store if you have an iPhone, or go to your Google Play or whatever it is store for your downloading Google apps. Once you put it on there, the app is free. You put in your zip code or something, and voila, there's all the information. Here's the number you call your congressperson and say, I'm aware of HR 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I need you to support it. But there's another act out there that was passed, called HR 1, also passed by the House. And basically HR 1 was even another bill that gave even more freedom to vote and making it easier for people to vote. And basically it expanded voting by having automatic same-day registration, 2 weeks of early voting for all voters. It bans purging of voting rolls. You're probably saying, what's that? Well, they bans the purging of voting rolls. What that means is you vote in one election, then the following year you don't vote for whatever reason, and then you come back the next election and try to vote again, your name's not on there. And they try to give you a provisional ballot or something else that would not allow your vote to be accounted right away. But the point is they're trying to discourage you from voting by making it harder for you to actually cast your vote. Also, it restores the full protections of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which I talked about, which was decimated by the Supreme Court in 2013. That part when I told you took out the pre-clearance portion, that pre-clearance portion is important. This puts it back in again, and it also has financial reforms for banning foreign money loopholes, adds money for election security, grants to help states replace voting machines, and processes for auditing and securing voting elections. Because not only do you have to make sure you can vote with as easy as it should be, then you have to make sure that the states don't mess around and try to actually change the outcomes of the people's vote or the voters' will. As we well know what happened in December 6th. So they're looking to put things in place to make sure, not December the 6th, January 6th. So you not only have to work to make sure that your vote is counted and you're able to vote, then you have to make sure that they actually count the vote and that the process happens the way it should happen. So don't be scared. Don't be intimidated. Go vote. Make sure that you get the right people in place and your vote is counted and you don't have people trying to change the will of the people. It's your right as a citizen of this country. You have a democracy like, Benjamin, what's his name? Benjamin Franklin. What he said, you got a democracy or a republic if you can keep it, meaning you have to do something. It's just not going to stay. There's plenty of people out there who would love to be able to change it. What I tell people all the time, we're going to get ready to introduce our guests in a minute, is if you remember your 12th grade government class, you have three parts, three separated powers in a democracy here in the United States. You've got the president, which is the executive. He's responsible for carrying out the laws. Those laws that he's carrying out are passed by the legislative body. And then, of course, you have the judiciary, which is making sure all laws are constitutional. So there you go. I've kind of gone through all of those. It's been a long day for me. I don't think I did my greatest presentation of it, but if you didn't understand this as clearly, listen, there's 94 other episodes you can go to where I've explained it differently. So I'm going to go now and start to introduce our guest coming up for today. Fantastic young lady. I have to admit I'm a little tired today, so I'm moving a little slow, folks. But for those of you that have heard this before, you can go see it in some other places. But let me go ahead and bring her information out. Here we go. Now, our guest today is Lisa Speller. Lisa Speller. She's the principal of the Speller Consulting Group. Yes. Speller Consulting Group is a consultant. They do consulting for government relations. They do healthcare consulting, grassroots advocacy, gaming, political strategy. She's going to talk about all those things and give you a lot more detail on it. But also, I'll give you a little bit about her educational background. She's with the Virginia State University here in Virginia. Also, she's gone to Capella University, where she has her BS as a registered nurse, and also same university where she has a master's in public administration and criminal justice. And then if you look to the right over there, you see that strikingly beautiful principal of the Speller Consulting Group holding a mic, so she's ready to talk, y'all. She's getting ready to come on and tell us a lot more, because I haven't given you a lot of her biography, but she's going to talk a little more for herself. But as we do for everyone who comes on to the show, we make sure that we give them some love coming in. So folks, Here we go. Let's make sure without further ado, it's that time. Let's welcome Lisa Speller. Let's give her the love coming in. Yes. Lisa, are you ready?
I am ready, Mark. How are you? We're having lots of fun on the other side there. Lots of fun.
Lots of fun on. Let's do a little more. There we go. Lisa, thank you for coming on to the show, folks.
Oh, you're welcome.
She's agreed to come on to the show. Today's been a difficult day for me. I did not prepare as well. And she agreed to come on and save me and be a guest who was going to tell us all about what she does. I don't think I've ever had anybody on who do what you do. So this is going to be an interesting interview. Well, not really an interview, a discussion. So tell me, Lisa Speller, how did you get into what you're doing as a small business? And how did you get into all these activities? Because it sounds as though you've got a background where a lot of your experience comes from the sort of things you've done early on in your career. So I'm going to shut up and
absolutely
turn it over to you. Go right ahead.
Awesome. Well, thanks for asking me to join you today. I'm glad to be here to have this conversation. You're asking me, how did I get started? You told my educational background. I was a registered nurse for many years, being a nurse, doing nursing, hospitals, a critical care nurse. I went into administration in healthcare, home health, ended up working in managed healthcare, your insurance companies. I started working as a manager in that lane. And funny enough, I ended up with an opportunity with the rollout of a new Medicaid program to start going into communities and educating people on what this program was. And that turned into an opportunity to actually be a director of marketing for Anthem out there. Yes, I was a director of marketing for Anthem for their Medicaid program. So that kind of got me outside of the traditional being, in the office type of role. Worked across the state, worked in every region of the state of Virginia, and got to know a lot of people. Got to know a lot of elected officials, did a lot of work in some of the areas of the state that need the most help. And in doing that, of course, that means you meet a lot of people, you meet a lot of elected officials, you meet a lot of leaders, both formal and informal leaders. And that kind of started, my advocacy role. Because, one of the things I didn't share with you is I also operate a nonprofit. Because one of the things that I do is I have to have an avenue to give back, and that's been a part of who I am. It's called the Community Empowerment Alliance, and one of the things that we do is we educate communities on voting. So that's just something, the education piece. Yeah, the education piece around what do I do? How do I do it? What needs to be done? I've been doing that for many years. But fast forward. Barack Obama became, a senator, heard him speak at the DNC. And I was like, this guy, I don't know what he's going to do, but he's going to do something. And whatever he does, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. And so, I was like, I'm like a political novice. I've always, been engaged, always voted, always been advocating for people to vote. But there was something different about what I heard. So it was something different, in that speech. And I, followed him for the next couple of years. And when there was talk of him running for, president, I was like, oh, I'm going to be involved. I'm going to do something. And, he decided, I guess he said he was going to run. He announced in Virginia. I was there. And the momentum around him as a candidate was like, wait a minute, this is fire. This is different. I've never seen this before. People are standing in line in 100 degrees just to hear this man say he's going to run for president. I was like, I got to be a part of this. So I didn't know what that meant, but said I got to be a part of it. Was
Right.
lucky enough to run into one of the fellows that ran Virginia. That was a part of the Obama field game that actually was here in the Richmond area. And I decided I was going to volunteer. Great time, volunteering, showing up and just doing all this stuff. It turned into like a full-time job almost because there was a lot of work to be done. I mean, I ran, for his first campaign, I had a setup location out in my neighborhood where they had the buses of people coming in. We were sending them out with turf. It was just an amazing time. So that kind of got me to the place where a lot of people started to know, who I was and what I was doing. Still all the
Now,
time.
where were you doing this at? In Petersburg?
No, I live in Henrico. So I was doing this in the Richmond and Henrico area. Yeah.
Okay.
Fast forward again at a voting event, ran into then Secretary of the Commonwealth, LeVar Stoney, who is now the mayor of the Commonwealth of the city of Richmond, and worked on his campaign from announcement to fulfillment of that initial historic election, being the youngest mayor. Went into his administration. Had no intentions of going into anyone's administration. I was working in healthcare. Okay. I was like, wait, what is this? And but it was an amazing opportunity. I learned so much about local government. And I think, I learned a lot about local government. And so, through that experience and through that, the experience of campaign after campaign, there are numerous other people that I have, helped with their campaigns. But through that experience, you see and you decide, hey, wait a minute, this is something I like to do. I like meeting people. I like, impact and positive change. I worked for 3 years in Governor Northam's administration. I was an appointee out at the Department of Health Professions. Yeah, where I worked with the Board of Nursing, which was amazing because I was a nurse and I got to work for the agency and be a part of the agency that actually licensed me years ago.
Okay.
So it was really good to be able to have some impact and working in that organization, working in state government, again, different, from corporate America, going into local government, going into state government.
Right.
Very different, very different. After that appointment, I left there and I was the vice president of government affairs and community relations for Colonial Downs. And that is a company that operates or used to operate multiple gaming emporiums across the Commonwealth. Totally different environment for me. Never worked in gaming, didn't know anything about gaming, but what I did know was people. So
now that's interesting. How did you go from healthcare to gaming? So what made you get interested in it?
They actually came looking for me. I did not. It wasn't something that I was looking for at all. It was not. I remember I had a friend that said to me, hey, I know somebody and they're trying to find you. And I was like, but why? And she was like, well, I don't know, but you should talk to them. And I went in, I talked to them, and what they were looking for was somebody who knew the state. And I knew the state very well. And part of my role, I will tell you, the most rewarding part of my role in working in gaming, because that was something I had never considered in my entire career, never even a thought, was the fact that part of what I did was I worked with a program it was a give back program where people wrote in or organizations would write in and they would need money. And I was the person that was able to make that happen. During the pandemic,
money. I mean,
nonprofits, it was a give back program that they do, and you could apply for funding and they would be reviewed. And I was a part of that review process was my role. And so which was something that, you know, it was the way that I found that this was a good industry to be able to build up people, build up communities. And because it's one of those things, you hear a lot about gaming. You know, you hear all the things that happen, and, you know, being out there in the community, you see a lot of things that it does. It brings jobs, it brings economic development. But the side that people don't see is what you can get with that economic development when you have an engine like gaming. And one of the things that I'm most proud of was when we went into the pandemic. What the president of the company, I never forget, he was like, you know what do we do? He's like, you're a nurse, what do we do? I said, well, you know, we closed ahead of everybody else. Lisa was already home during the pandemic. I was already home. They were deciding what to do. I was already home. When that first case hit Virginia, I was already work from home. So there was no question about that one. So one of the things that we did during the pandemic was an idea that I came up with, because we had all these first responders, and you remember the first weeks of the pandemic.
Oh yeah,
everything was closed. We opened kitchens in every one of those properties, and we fed people for free. You could phone in your order. You could send somebody to come pick up hot food for free and take it back to the job. So we fed doctors, nurses, pharmacists, firefighters, police officers. We fed everybody. And we didn't just feed people. We fed at every location across Virginia.
Really? Now, who was sponsoring all this?
The company that I work for, Colonial Downs.
Colonial Downs was doing this across the state of Virginia.
Yeah, we did it.
All their different facilities, or
at every property. Okay. It was, you could drive up and you could pick up this food and you could take. We had the food; it had to go, and we kept getting it, and we did it. I can't remember the number of meals that we served, but I will tell you, I'm from Emporia,
right?
And so during the pandemic, they had an issue down there where, you know, something happened with school cafeterias, and one of the, you know, like, workers caught COVID, and then people were passing away, and they couldn't get the food to the kids. And I was able to, through this company, have them take food. We took truckloads of food to Emporia to be distributed. The people I worked with, they were great. They were really good at doing that type of thing. And when I asked, it was never a question. So I felt like being in that role within the gaming industry gave me the opportunity to be able to do some really good things. We did that in Petersburg. We did that in Danville. We did it in a lot of different places. So if people called and they asked me for something, I tried my best to figure out a way to make it happen. And so, you know, it was a good position. I learned a lot. Not only did I, you know, learn about, you know, the give back piece, but I learned the business. And I learned a lot about.
Are you a full-time employee there, or did you start working?
No, I was a full-time employee there. I left there in December of 2021 and started my own consulting firm.
Oh, okay. And what made you start your own consulting firm? What made you think, okay, this is the time I'm going to go ahead and open up the Speller Consulting Group? Why did you do it?
I think one of the reasons why I did it was I watched a lot of things happen that didn't have to. And I was like, you know, if I was doing my own thing, this would have happened. We would have did this. This would have happened. We would have helped this. We would have moved this legislation forward. We would have done that. And it was just something I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to work for myself. And at the core of everything that I do, when you own it, you're able to give the time, the attention to whatever area you're working in. So when I represent my clients, you know, I represent them to the fullest. I listen to what it is they want to accomplish. We come up with a plan, we execute a strategy, and we make things happen. And I also have the ability to take on the clients that I want,
Mhm.
and the ability to not take on those who maybe I don't buy into their beliefs.
Well, you've got all this healthcare experience. Now you got gaming experience. You got experience working for different administration at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
How have you taken all this and transformed this or translated this to your small business entrepreneurial activities?
Relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Very simply, I had a vice president that I worked with, that was my supervisor, tell me, he said to me, he said, no matter what company you're working for, remember one thing.
Mm-hmm.
He said, every person you meet is a relationship. He said, don't put the company ahead of you. That is
Right.
your relationship that you own. And
Right.
that advice was the best advice I think anybody's ever given me. Because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people go out and they are the brand that they work for,
Right.
and don't know anything about the actual person you're talking to. You have not built a relationship. It's transactional. And when things are
Mm-hmm.
transactional and you need to go back for another transaction, people remember that. The key
Mm-hmm.
and what I've learned is it's relational. So if you are, I listened to what you were talking about as far as voting. That has been, the pillar of everything that I try to encourage people to do. It is vote. Make sure your voice is heard, because if you don't let it, if it's not heard, you can't speak to anything if you're not casting your vote.
No,
So
you
right,
that
you're
is
irrelevant. I have so many people say, "Oh, they don't need my vote. They got everybody else's voting. Everybody else voted." How many elections have we sat back and we said, "Oh, if nobody, people didn't turn out."
well,
So
when
and
you don't vote, you are voting. You're basically
you're
giving
voting,
your vote to the other side because
right.
they're like, don't worry about that.
You're voting for whoever, whoever is in charge, whoever is favored.
Right.
You're doing that. So I think for me, the advocacy component of what you do in government affairs and government relations, whether the
Mm-hmm.
matter is related to healthcare. I think I'm on. Did we lose you? Think we
Oh,
lost
you,
you for a
you
quick
didn't
second.
lose me. I just put you on the screen by yourself. I'm
Oh,
still here.
okay. Oh, okay. Because it kind of blipped out. It just blipped my screen out. But yeah,
No,
so when it comes
go
to
ahead. We're listening to you.
okay, it doesn't, to me, it does not matter what industry you're working in or who you're working for, as long as the goal remains the same. And that is making sure that your client is served appropriately, making sure whatever it is that they've hired you to do, you're working at your best to get that done. So that's one of the things that I've learned in the small business that I've developed in, and always being relational. Transactional, if you will always need to go back and have a conversation with someone. So no relationship should be squandered. That's how I look at it.
You are absolutely correct. As you can see, I do my own sort of jumping around production work. Sometimes it works smooth, sometimes it doesn't. But
Right. Right. Exactly.
creating relationships are the key with people because, I mean, those are the things that last long term and you're able to get things done behind the scenes and other
Mm-hmm.
ways. So, and it's kind of interesting because your background, what kind of nursing did you actually do? I mean, what kind
I
of
was a
nurse?
critical care nurse
Critical
originally. I
care.
worked
Okay.
in critical care as ICU, as a cardiac critical care
Right.
nurse. And then I spent the majority of my healthcare career in home health.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And why did you go that way? Why did you get into
Nursing.
nursing to begin with? What?
So I was at Virginia State University, go Trojans, land of Troy. And I was in information technology. And during a summer break,
Mhm.
I took a job in a long-term care facility in Emporia. And
Mhm.
so a nursing home is what people call them, nursing home. And I worked there for the whole summer, and I watched the nurses' aides. I was like administrative. I was assistant to like the director of nursing, you know, but I was always drawn to some of the residents and some of the patients, like people that were wanderers and people. I was like, no, you're not gonna, you know, I was always, and I had one of the nurses say to me, have you ever considered being a nurse? And I was like, no, why would I do that? You know, she was like, because you're really good with the residents here. Like you get it. And I was like, And I always would talk to them. And you'll probably understand this. I remember polling people, you know, because you're young. You're like, oh, nursing. I went to one of the higher ranking nurses and I asked her, I said, look, let me ask you a question. I have a couple people, other nurses, they're registered nurses telling me I should consider nursing school. Oh, no, you should never do that. Bad decision. I was like, really? Why? Oh, it's so hard. You can never do it.
So hard.
So hard. You can never do it. Now she didn't lie about that part because it was hard. Then I go back to something.
Effort.
I'm like young. I'm like, what? Okay. So I go to somebody else and they said, absolutely. We watch you. You are really good. And you don't shy away from watching the stuff that we're doing. I was like, that's because, you know. And so I made a call and I was like, listen, Virginia State University did not have a nursing program at that time. They did not have a nursing program. That was back when, you know, they're an amazing university now, but they were having some challenges back then.
Well, so a lot of great folks come out of Virginia State.
Yeah. I remember when it was, you know, when it was growing. I guess it was in its state of, you know, flux or whatever. But it was a lot of programming they did not have then. And so I came up to Richmond, talked to a few nursing programs. And back when I went to nursing school, it was always a wait. And the woman I talked to, she said, it's like a year wait. I was like, a year? She was like, a year to get into nursing school. Yes. It used to be, it was such a shortage. And I was like, well, I don't know if I can wait a year.
There's still a shortage of nurses.
It is. I'm in college now. She was like, I tell you what, if you can get every prerequisite done over the summer, like between now and the summer, then I'll consider it. And I was like, okay, I went to night school. I took day classes and night classes. Wow. I did both. Because I didn't want that gap. You know, I didn't want to, you know, I was already in school. So I was like, let's keep going. So
I see all those things behind you, so you got something done.
So I finished the prerequisites. I went and got into the program, and it was a hard program. It was. I went to J. Sargent Reynolds back then. It's Reynolds Community College now, to their nursing program, and it was the one program in the state that they said if you got through that program, you would pass your boards.
Right.
You didn't get through the program. Yeah, and I did pass my boards on the first go around. Wanted to be an ICU nurse. It was, you know, I figured out nursing was one of my things because when I graduated, it was amazing. I got the medical nurse award of the year for the class or something, because when you find the thing that is you, it's easy.
Yeah,
you enjoy it. It feels right. I tell my kids that now. It's easy. It's not easy in the moment, but it's something you enjoy working hard to get.
Because you enjoy the work.
Yeah. And so I would not be in the place that I am right now doing what I do if I had never been to nursing school. Because what I did in nursing school and in healthcare exposed me to what my true calling is, which is giving back and helping people and advocating and working in communities and trying to empower change.
So how in the world did you go from there to your public administration and criminal justice, your master's in there? So tell me.
That's a weird one. That's a weird one. So I was senior policy advisor to the mayor of Richmond. And I would always be in these meetings, right? And I was like, they would be talking about things. And I was like, But you like, do I know it? Do I not know it? What is this about? And I found myself working a lot with public safety.
Okay.
So when I worked in that office, my job, my responsibility was ensuring transparency in government, working with the community, and I worked with fire and police. So that was my lane of what I did. Big lane, but that was my role. And so within that, when the mayor was elected, it was a time when things were kind of calm. And then all of a sudden, like right in January, when he went into office, the crime went berserk.
Was this during COVID, or what year was this?
This was his first administration. This was 2017. Okay. And it was, there were shootings, and it started like New Year's Eve. I remember that, like the day that he was sworn in. And so that, having to be in these meetings with these different law enforcement agencies, and I'll call them the alphabet soup, because it was, state level, federal level, everybody who was involved in how we get, yeah, there were a couple of projects like Respect Richmond that I worked on with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. I worked on another project with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, where we brought all the Commonwealth attorneys together, and we had roundtable discussions about the root causes of crime. And so that piqued my interest. And so I was like, I need to know more. I need to understand.
All of this starts from a people scenario with respect to the area you're talking about. Why Richmond? Why did Richmond have, or what did you discover why Richmond was having a sudden surge in crime? Any other factors at that time that were maybe responsible for that?
I think then, and if I can remember back to the study, because they ended up having like some students at UVA like dig deep into that. A lot of it had to do with the level of poverty in some of those then housing communities. It was poverty, it was no jobs, it was access to resources. I remember this was during the time when I don't know if are you in Richmond? You're from Richmond, the area?
I'm in Northern Virginia, but I know Richmond.
So you may have heard the story about, there was a state police officer that was sitting in a car, and it was in a community, and he was shot in the car. It was an odd thing. And I remember in that moment, I was like, you're sitting in a car, you're in in one of the communities, and he was shot. I don't remember all the circumstances around it.
So you're saying a uniformed officer
he was not uniformed. I guess he was just regular clothes, but he was in a unmarked police car. But he was state. He was state. He was supposed to be there. I don't know why. I don't remember.
Right.
But I remember that one incident, and I remember the next day, state police, Richmond PD, everybody, that we all went, and I went out there to the community where this had actually happened. And I remember being out there, and I remember looking at the faces of the officers, and I was like, and this apparently was somebody who was known. It wasn't like there was nothing happening in the moment that I remember. But it was just, why do these things happen? It was a big why. And the whole working in public administration, and wanting to dig deeper than what people say, because I will tell you this, a lot of things happen with the different types of leadership that you have in local government. Because when you have, certain forms of government, different things fall under different people. But what you have to look at is, well, what are we doing to impact making things go the way we need them to go? And I just felt like I needed more education. I needed to know more about it. And it became like a passion. It became like something that I really wanted to know more about, because my lane at that time was public administration and government.
Well, let me ask you this. You know that there's going to be the vice president who may be coming to Richmond tomorrow. I understand she is, and she's going to be talking to small businesses. This is Small Business Week or month or whatever it is as well. How do you think small business is doing in Richmond? If you were going to ask or give some advice to the vice president or the president as a local small business person, what would you tell them if you were in that meeting?
Well, I think in this moment, there are many, many small businesses that are doing well. But I also believe that small businesses need more support. They need more support. I am a board member of the Metropolitan Business League. And one of the things that they do is focus on small business and entrepreneurship. But I think that the administration during the campaign talked a lot about supporting small business, talked a lot about, reinventing the SBA and making it easier for small businesses to do business with government. And I think some of that needs a lot more attention.
Yeah, for example, we in the state of Virginia, I've been advocating for quite some time that they do more to change the acquisition laws for small business, in particular for African-American owned business. They're not getting the amount of contracts they should be getting based upon the representation of African-Americans in the state, around about 20%. They don't get anywhere near 20% of acquisitions on a statewide level. So in Richmond, how do you believe Richmond or Greater Richmond area? Do you think they're doing better than the rest of the state? Or
no, I think it's probably all. No, I think it's probably all about the same, because you have to think about it like this. If you are, let's say you're a new small business, and so I'm SWAM certified. And I went through that process. That process was, wasn't too complicated. But what becomes complicated is the amount of manpower hours it takes to respond to anything that they put out there.
Right.
Because it's one of those things where you have to weigh, am I going to just go out here and get some business, or am I going to, search? So I think that there could be more, there could be some, education, attention around putting things there that your local small businesses can review and actually respond to, and it doesn't take, Well,
I think that's something I would agree with you on, and I think that a certain percentage of that business should be cordoned off for particular constituencies within the state, particularly when they have a history of not doing that business, strengthening some of the subcontracting laws that happen with the prime contractors that don't actually give the business that that they bid it on, but when it comes time to actually do the work, there's no laws enforcing them to do what they claim to have said they were going to do in their proposal. These are the sort of things, I'm talking to you as a woman-owned business and a small business and African-American-owned business. I believe we need to advocate on behalf of that for our businesses in our community, but also for small business to say, hey, a certain percentage of this business, majority of business are small business. Why aren't they saying, hey, X amount of that business goes to small business? There's small business that can do this work. They can be the primes on this business. We need to be pushing our folks on that. That's my view of the world. We're trying to, push our
opportunity
and folks to get that sort of policy in place. Is that something that you
opportunities right there? Yeah, putting those opportunities in the forefront so that they're easily attainable. Absolutely.
Well, I got to tell you, I was particularly impressed with you because I'm out of Hampton, Hampton Institute, now at Hampton University. I'm old school, but my wife is a nurse. 40 years in business. So, Hampton nurse too. So I know a little bit about what you do there, but your background is extremely interesting. It's not a background you see a lot of. So right now, you don't see too many nurses who are doing this and doing that and other things. So what are some of the short-term goals that you're looking at now where you haven't done anything, but you said you're doing a nonprofit piece, but what are some of the opportunities that you would like to really go for that you haven't had an opportunity to do as of yet?
Well, I think right now, I don't think there is like a particular short-term goal that I have other than to continue to grow my business overall, increase awareness of what it is that I do, because there's so many people that reach out to me and they think that I'm working at one of the places that they've known me from. I get calls from people who say, "Hey, Lisa, I used to look, I have a nonprofit. I have an event that's happening next week. Can you see if, Colonial Downs?" I'm like, I don't work there anymore. I even get calls. I've got a text the other day and somebody said, "Hey, did you check to see if the city is still doing support for Black?" I was like, I don't work for the city anymore. So it's like all these things.
You still have those relationships though, right?
I know. And so I think for me, it's like right now, it's like branding, letting people know what I do is key. I've been very blessed. I had a really good year last year. Very blessed by that. Had learned a lot, gained a lot of, experience around, what it's like to be doing I've always done something on the side, but never have I done this full time. So it was a very interesting year I call it a really good year because I learned a whole lot.
I'm going to ask you one other question, then I'm going to ask you the final question I ask everyone who comes on the show. But
okay.
I also ask people, because one of the big opportunities out there for small business, particular African-American business, is the cannabis industry in Virginia. $4 billion in sales in Virginia, right? For multi-site organization, healthcare dispensaries. Yes. Laws aren't yet for retail or for cultivation. As you can see, that's a huge industry that's going to be larger going forward. As a nurse, when we talk about things like expungement and equity around these things in Virginia, when those laws are getting in place, are you looking to make sure that people who have the background that you have in small businesses like you have an opportunity to be involved in this business? Because people think, well, just dispensaries and cultivation. But no, you're talking security, you're talking pharmacy, you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about wellness. I mean, all that stuff is right in your lane.
It is. I have worked with a couple of clients in that lane. Okay. But I will tell you that it's one of those things, right? So you have to there's so many components to the cannabis industry, know, and until we get all the laws around what we're going to do. I just saw an article before I got on. It may have been while you were talking about some changes that are happening right now around the laws around cannabis in Virginia. And so I don't know what the details of it are, but it wasn't even about laws. It was like things are about to get tighter. And so I don't know if it's, what's being put in stores, because I've been reading a lot about some of the stores having things that are not quite right. From a nurse perspective, you want to make sure that there's certain quality, that things are regulated a certain way so that people are getting what they need medicinally. Right. This is not even talking recreational lane, but that the quality of whatever it is, be it CBD, be it hemp, be it marijuana, whatever it is, that those THC levels and all the things that go into growing, which is a whole nother industry in itself for the farmers, that everything is regulated. So folks know that they're getting certain things for certain elements. The recreational piece, that's a totally different lane, not tied to healthcare per se. But, from a nursing perspective, you always want to make sure there's the quality aligns with what it is that you're dispensing.
And you've got a lot of laws that need to be looked into. Nurses, I mean, cannabis is medicine. People who may have used it for medicinal reasons may affect their licenses if they're a nurse or something like that. There's a lot of different lanes there where
that's a big deal, because as a nurse, if you're licensed, we have something called a compact, and we're licensed to across all states. So if you, let's say it's a nurse and the nurse is using it, or it's caught with it, giving it, whatever.
For medicinal reasons.
For medicinal purposes, they're taking it, whatever. But in one state, it might be legal, but their license could be in jeopardy.
Right.
So
there's lots of ways, but I knew someone from your background, definitely a lot of consulting that are state level, federal level, things like that. So now I'm going to ask you the question I asked everybody, because I've kind of gone over a little bit, but I'm going to ask you a question. If you were queen for a day, you have a magic scepter, and anything you say is going to be done, and it would happen just by you waving your scepter or wand, and you had that power to make it happen, what would be the first thing that you would actually do? Now, I'm going to get off the line and let you answer this question.
What would the first thing that I would actually do, and I'm going to take this from a healthcare perspective, I would want to wave that wand and give everybody access to quality healthcare without it being an issue. Whether it's free, whether it's, it's just there, but everyone to not have to ever worry about seeing a doctor, seeing a dentist, getting their eyes checked, getting their prescriptions. And if I could wave it again, it would be for everybody, for great health, because that's key. Health is wealth.
I don't know. I must be clairvoyant, because I can kind of guess what people are going to say by what sort of background they have. I know you were going to address health. So you're exactly.
I mean, if you don't have your health, you have nothing.
You got nothing.
You have
can't even. You don't have your health, right? You can't
if you don't have your health, you can't even vote.
It's extremely important. Well, it looks like you've done some fantastic things. I would love to talk to you later, see how things are going, Lisa.
Awesome.
Looks like you've had an incredible career, a very diverse career. Looks like you've got a whole lot more that's going to be happening ahead of you. So, love to have you on at another time. And as I go to my, we clap you out, we bring you in, we play a little bit of Bob. So we just want to say thank you for all the things you've done. So we'll give you those thanks to get on the show. And we are looking to basically say, here we go. Thank you for being on the Small Business Coffee Show. We want to have you back at another time. So come on back, okay? Folks, Lisa Speller with the Speller Consulting Group. Make sure you check her out. See you, Lisa.
All right. See ya.
Bye-bye.